The man in question is online fun. Matt Flesch, guys, he created during we were just sitting there in our fart blankets. He used the pandemic to come up with this masterpiece currently available on YouTube called Last Comiskey. He and his brother spoke with many of the luminaries of the 1990 season, many of the characters that are employed by the White Sox then and now. But thank you so much for joining us. I cannot tell you, and you've gotten it all over the World Wide Web as far as kudos are concerned, but I cannot tell you how much that goddamn thing meant to me. Rewatched it again last night. Still choke up a little bit. Forced me to give the history of just one of the All-Stars, Nancy Faust, to Joe, and I forgot to grab our wig. But I want you to take a look at Joe, who is indeed an actress. How about her for the Nancy Faust story?
I'm from Chicago.
That's her.
There we go. Yeah.
Right.
We gotta work on the accent.
So for those who are not as obsessed as Bill and do not know but are interested and we're piquing their interest into what you created, let us know. This is about Comiskey Park. It's last year, correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So Last Comiskey, it's about the final season played at the Old Comiskey Park. And so there's a lot of reasons why that was a special year. Like, they're closing down the park, which is this beloved old ballpark, tons of history, lots of tradition. But then also that team was supposed to be like terrible, and it was supposed to be a sad year, and maybe they'd win 60 games. They had all these young players that weren't supposed to be good yet, and instead they challenged like this Goliath A's team with like Jose Canseco and Ricky Henderson. It was such a fun summer. And it just, and then there's also like there's so much about the park, and it was like a carnival atmosphere, the vendors, the security, Nancy Faust, like it was very non-corporate, and it was just kind of a crazy place. And we tried to capture that too, like what it felt like to be a vendor, what it felt like to be, security or a fan or Nancy, all that stuff too.
Certainly she is gets an MVP nod for this one. We were certainly talking. This is such an interesting time and very sad one in retrospect. I love the Bill Burr clip you sent me last night. Really nailed it. It's also ushering in a new era as far as we were just talking about this. Body type, if you will. In one corner, you got, say, a Ron Karkovice. And then on the other, you got the WWE that is McGuire and Canseco. And I was telling Joe that if this had happened a little later in the 90s, it wouldn't have been a jockstrap in those stands. It would have been a giant syringe. And Joe noticed that as well. And we showed a picture of Karkovice to her for a yin and yang here. But maybe speak to that a little bit, too, because you really do a great job of getting former players being like, these A's are really big. It's perfect. You show without telling, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I love that with like Scott Radinsky saying like their smallest guy was bigger than our biggest guy.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, Karkovice is a good example. And like Scott Fletcher, Craig Graybeck was like a real little guy. Ozzie was small.
Mm-hmm.
So many of those players were, they just, if you saw them on the street, you would just never guess that they were a professional athlete. You would just think they're just like you in a lot of ways. And, the other interesting thing about that is all those players, they played 150 games. And I don't know if you followed the current Sox, but nobody can even play 100 games. So maybe all these muscles aren't the best idea. That would be my takeaway.
You are so right. I would go back to that one telling Sports Illustrated cover. You remember Nomar Garcia-Pera from the hated Red Sox?
Of course.
I love when she patronizes me. There was one year he's on the cover of Sports Illustrated shirtless, and people are like, what the fuck? Something had changed. And immediately when he may or may not have sort of discovered a certain form of training, injured all the time. Really never the same once he started bulking up for whatever reason, I'm not sure. And it was their spring preview, and that's across the board. And it was, in the 80s, it was still thought by a lot of people that even just lifting weights could affect your swing badly.
Yeah, that's true. And, it's not just like the weight training, because there's that too. Like, I think players would work out in the off season, but they wouldn't really lift once the season started. I don't know what they do now. But there's diet, Chicken Willie was cooking fried chicken and bacon covered hot dogs and things. And now, like, I think every player's probably got like a personal dietitian. They're measuring caloric intake. And the White Sox in 1990, again, they all played like the full season, 150 games, and they were eating fried chicken and hot dogs. So,
Please
I don't
speak.
know.
This is a great example of some of the many personalities you sort of dust off and give a spotlight to in this amazing docu. And you know what you're doing because you got Joe's attention. We were speaking. She wanted to ask about the food. I'm like, you got to ask about Chicken Willie. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. That was a legend, and again, not really a team dietitian, I would say. Or maybe, I don't know, but Joe, you could
Well,
question about him.
when Bill was telling me about this, it really made me think. And you speak a little bit, or you have in some stuff I've read about the vibe. The energy is different now at ballparks than it was back then. Like you were saying, sort of like a carnival atmosphere. And I related it to like a giant block party, where it's almost like the baseball players own all these homes and they get together and there they are, they're eating fried chicken, they're swinging a bat, they're going around bases. And yeah, they were athletes, but now it's like they just take it so much more seriously. And it's like, can you have as much fun when you're taking it that seriously? I don't know if it's also a thing about, like you said, everything being so corporate now. If there's just more at stake, there's more money on the line. So that vibe has just changed.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I think it's a combination of all those things too, because I think one of the things about Old Comiskey is that the players felt really close to the fans. Like there wasn't a lot of separation. Like if you were a fan at Old Comiskey, like you really felt like you were on top of the action. In the upper deck at Old Comiskey, like you felt like you were like gonna fall onto the field and you were close. Like there wasn't 3 rows of skybox like every stadium has now.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it was. It's like the players and the fans' proximity and the players' willingness to like chat with the fans between innings. Ozzie was known for that. Other players like Don Paul, like they did that. Like they really went out of their way for it to be like a relationship between the players and the fans. And that is very much not the way going to a game feels anymore. Like they don't even do batting practice a lot of time by the time you're there.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I don't get autographs, but it doesn't seem like there's as many autograph opportunities, all that stuff.
And you were really, I've heard you say in interviews that despite all the amazing found footage that you got from the likes of, say, Nancy Faust's home movies to just fans out there, doing a great work, culling the stuff from the internet, you talked about how the video and all the images in the world could not do that upper deck justice for how it was laid out. There's this great Gene Shepard who did A Christmas Story, and he's the narrator. He was a huge White Sox fan, and he always told this story of how his dad was ostracized from Comiskey Park and hated by the crowd because he had this upper deck chair, and he had Dad in his big voice, and his dad was heckling Gehrig, and Gehrig looked right up at him and hit a game-winning 3-run home run, and he was booed out of the stadium. And you look at Gene Shepard in his seat telling the story, and you think to yourself, there's no fucking way Gehrig heard this guy. But if you were actually there, you saw how it was laid out, and in fact, how it was positioned. Absolutely, Gehrig saw him, and it's very hard to describe the dynamics, even if you look at a digital makeup of it.
I remember, like in the bullpen, like you would trade pitchers like a handful of nachos for a ball. They'd be like, "I'll throw you a ball. Give me like some of those nachos."
So great.
It was like that. I don't know. I mean, that was just so cool. Like that kind of stuff was just so fun.
The other thing too, and we saw a little bit of it in the trailer. You don't see as many shirtless people in the stands anymore. That's another, and then maybe that's one of the few things that belongs in the past. I don't know, but maybe. And again, I only go to Chicago maybe once a year for a Sox series these days, and for a long time, and it's usually cold. But you don't see the fat dude with his man breasts enjoying a beer on his stomach. There we go. Look at that. That is it. Literally, if you're wearing a shirt, you're an outlier.
Yeah.
Really, in this one. Look at that. Unbelievable. And we famously had, I think they'd taken it out by then, but Bill Veeck had put a shower out there for the really dog days of summer.
Yeah.
And you, as a fan, could go into the outfield, pull a thing, and just take a shower in the middle of the game.
Wild.
Ice cold water. Yeah. It's so true. The shirtless though, like that's one thing I noticed. I was like, everybody was shirtless. Like,
yes.
And it doesn't matter your body type. Like everybody
no.
just took their shirt off. They don't care. Like it was crazy.
If for anyone that thought this wasn't shot on location, look at the guts of this guy. of these guys without their shirts on, and they're going to know it was shot in Chicago. It's very evident that it was. And
so true.
one of the other things I thought that could keep our little Joe in this was just also when you're pouring through just mountains and mountains of footage, which are now time capsules, really. What were some of the other things that stuck out to you as far as the differences between the here and then? Because there were a lot for me. I mean, just everything. Also, like the mullets I'd forgotten were still a thing at that point. Certainly the body types of the players. But what were some other stuff that was just like, wow, that was a really late 80s, 1990 thing?
Yeah, it's true. Like one was just like the organ. Like now it's just like you have like music just like blasting into the stadium, super loud.
Yes.
Like you start to talk to the person next to you, and all of a sudden it's like, you can't hear anymore. And so
Yeah.
I sound like an old guy, but like back then, like the organ was there, and sometimes it got really loud, but a lot of times it was just there, and you always heard it, and it was surprising. But then also like walking around the concourse, there was all these like little shops. Now it's like very corporate. Like you got the sock shop here and the sock shop there. But back then you had like these little corners where it was like, you know, like an older woman, and you'd be like, hey, what new stuff do you have? And she'd be like, I got this button. I got this pennant from 1986. It was like going to like a corner comic store or something. And it was really cool.
You are so right. I remember being so excited because we would go there for such a stupid amount of games. And anytime a vendor would change something, they had a new sweatshirt, or there was a new style of hat, your mind would blow because you were so used to saying the same dusty shit every game. And and there were just many uniform options, all of that stuff. We were just talking about a little something similar going on with the Yankees right now, and it actually would tie back to the White Sox if you wanted to continue with the Yankee story.
Sure, yeah, it was just the 100-year anniversary of the old Yankee Stadium. And you know, to commemorate or to honor the anniversary, those who went to the most recent game were given a commemorative ticket from the 1923 opener. But it's hard to honor a building that no longer stands. So currently, Old Yankee Stadium, it's a ball field. Then even, you know, we just love tearing stuff down here. 2008,
we really do.
We rebuilt again. But I don't know who said it, but they were like, well, pretty soon we're going to tear down the current one, probably rebuild over the oldest one, and it will just keep flip-flopping like that.
I can see that happening.
So, I mean, I know you're a Chicago fan, but maybe the next thing you do is you do footage of the old Yankee Stadium.
I love old ballparks, and we, me and my dad and a couple of my brothers went out to Yankee Stadium in its final year to check that park out. We sat in the upper deck, and I have never been in a situation where fans were so intensely, unbelievably, like, it was crazy. It was just like we had this group behind us, and I'd never seen anything like it. So New York fans are a special group, like Chicago. I mean, Chicago is the same way, but I love that old park, and Yankee Stadium, and I can't believe, like, why wouldn't they just like maybe leave the dugouts in place? So you could go in the same dugout that these guys went in, or like something. Like why?
What
why
a missed
opportunity!
Yeah,
what a missed opportunity. The beautiful awnings in Old Comiskey. You were saying this in an interview. Why not leave one or two of them up in the parking lot? What a great photo op. We have the outline of home plate.
What is Comiskey now?
A parking lot, and there's a home plate that you can pose by where the actual home plate was. Unless they've updated it, that's really all I recall being there, and I was there last year.
They added like some grass around it, so it's a little better now.
How nice.
Right.
But, it's a parking lot. It's just a parking lot. They were just very quickly looking to get the new park up and the old park down.
Yes.
And I don't think they really thought about, because how cool would it be if I was thinking, like, if they had the old scoreboard still up there playing the game, and then your tailgaters could like watch the game, and maybe, I mean, there's just so many cool things they could have done, but I think they were just in a hurry, but they still could. You could like, that's what I hope. Like there's stuff they could still do. Like they could lower the upper deck. They could put like an old replica of the old scoreboard in the parking lot. Like, why not do some of that stuff? Fans would love it.
Yeah. And that goes, I mean, and it made me think when Joe found this one, I'm wondering how much cooperation you actually got with White Sox corporate for a lot of the reasons we just discussed. Because from their end, there is going to be some acknowledgement in this. Again, you do such a beautiful job of showing rather than telling, but there's a lot of what ifs in this bad boy, whether you actually state them or not. And the White Sox corporate currently would kind of have to deal with maybe some of those questions in cooperating with this. I think that even now they very much would prefer the focus be on the current stadium rather than the nostalgia for the older one. Did you run into any resistance? Was there no cooperation at all? Was it tentative? How did that work?
Yeah, my approach all along was like I'm afraid to ask for assistance because then they might say no, you know. And I think sometimes when you're working in a corporate environment, like if somebody asks you, now you got an agenda item for the meeting, and the answer is probably going to be no. So I didn't want it to get shut down, and so I haven't heard from the White Sox. I didn't reach out to them, but they haven't shut it down, and there's a lot of White Sox video and stuff in there.
Well, I think it is important to note this was you aren't profiting off of this project, correct? This was a nonprofit thing you did?
It was all nonprofit. We made that clear right from the outset.
Yeah, like that probably has something to do with it too. If you're not profiting off of them, then.
Well, it also, that helps too. But also, and you were wondering about, again, how he got a lot of his material and how he reached out and everything.
Well, the footage, it is incredible. I love found footage. I love seeing the history. And it makes sense that sports fans would hold on to that stuff and would know exactly where it is and then want to share it. But something I want to know, right? So technology has changed like crazy. You're given files, right, that you want to download. The resolution probably sucks. I'm wondering if you were given any footage that was so cool and you wanted to use, but like it just didn't look good. Did that happen at all?
Well, there's some that we used anyway that was pretty bad. Like the beer vendor footage was from a projector that this guy Mark Reiner made a little film in the 70s that we put in there, and I wish that was better. Yeah, because there's some really good stuff he had in the vendor room where like they were getting ready to go out there and vend, and they were chatting and like getting the hot dogs ready, and they're like wrapping the hot dogs, and it's like so unsanitary, It was really neat, but it was too dark. Like we couldn't use that. Yeah. So we used some of it, but I really wish there was some way to restore it and brighten it so you could see it. Because that vendor, like inside the bowels of the stadium and the vendor's commissary and stuff, that was really cool. We couldn't use that, unfortunately.
And what's one of like the strangest clips you received?
Oh yeah,
that's good. Yeah, it's a good question. Everything was pretty straightforward, I think. We got, just a lot of video. And, you know what? One guy, John Brudnick, he was a security guy there. And he went around and he had access to all these different rooms. And so there was a jail cell in Comiskey Park.
Wow.
And so he went in there and there was like a kid like handcuffed, and like there's like I think like back in the 70s they would like there was drunken fights and people would go in there. So there's some great stuff that we got. But yeah, that was a little weird. I was like, wow, I guess I should have known that there was a jail cell.
I did not know that until I watched this. That blew my mind. I had maybe there was a reason for that. They didn't necessarily you weren't necessarily supposed to know about the old jail cell, or maybe they'd forget that they threw you in there for a couple days. Who knows? But absolutely fascinating. Now, like I assume also, I think you've touched on this a little bit, but do we have a sort of Ken Burns type inning 10 coming up? Because since this has come out and been such a huge hit, you must have been receiving after the fact so much amazing stuff.
Yeah, I got some people like have sent some additional video, and we're gonna do some things because the Torborg family. I've talked to Dale Torborg.
He comes off looking great in this.
Torborg, manager. And Jeff, and he was great. Everybody loved him. But I'm gonna do an interview with Jeff here, hopefully in the next month or something. And then he's got some some awesome stories. Like a turning point of that year was Lee Stevens hitting that big home run in August, and they were telling me the story that they were so mad driving home that they were speeding. And the cop pulled him over, and the cop was like, "Oh, Jeff Torborg." He was like, "Great win tonight." And Jeff was like, "We didn't win. Lee Stevens hit a homer." And the cop was like, "Damn it." He was like, no, that can't be true. I turned the game off in the 8th. And they didn't give him a ticket. But like, there's a ton of stories like that they had.
I love that.
Fucking great. What about we have the most famous groundskeepers in all of baseball, both because they're so good at it, but it's like a dynasty. Their family's been with the White Sox for, God, I want to say 60, 70 years. And also they know like to water the lawn when a visiting team comes in if they're particularly bad with that type of grass. Like all these little tricks. The Boston family, did they give you anything? Did you were you able to speak with them at all? Again, currently employed by the White Sox. Maybe they didn't want him to.
Yeah, some people employed by the White Sox were just a little hesitant to
Mm-hmm.
participate because it wasn't like a team sanctioned thing. Because I wanted to get Gene Honda too and a few others.
Sure, God, yeah.
But Roger Bossard, a lot of people told me like you should speak to Roger. I just couldn't figure out how to get him.
Mm-hmm.
But we definitely wanted to give a nod to him because one of the cool things about Chicago is that the White Sox in particular is we have all these heroes that are like the organist, the groundskeeper, the team trainer, the cook in the clubhouse. Like this, I don't know how many other teams have like these peripheral characters that we know so well.
We were showing Joe a bunch of Nancy Faust footage yesterday. We've been pretty much prepping for this all week, and to get her into her role for the upcoming Nancy Faust biopic.
That's right, yeah.
But Nancy did the soundtrack for this.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, and she was one of the first people that you spoke with, especially so Joe can take notes for her role. Tell us a little bit about that, because she's just as amazing as advertised. They always say don't meet your heroes, but Nancy Faust is a saint.
That's so true. Yeah, she exceeds expectations when you meet her in terms of just being super friendly and really caring, like wants to know about you, asks you a lot of questions, just very kind person. Yeah, she played in the upper deck, like in the crowd, like she was in the crowd, like you could walk up to her, recommend a song, all that stuff. So, and she was one of the first people that latched on to what we were doing, and we went out to her house, which is in this area, Chicago area, and she did like a little concert for us. Like she played the songs, and we would say like the name of a player, and she would play their walk-up song, and we recorded all of that, and a lot of that is what ends up being in the documentary. So it's not like we brought her into a studio to do it was more like we just tried. Anytime we were able to visit her, we would ask her to play the organ and record it, so we could use it in the
I have some additional Nancy Faust footage from the documentary, but maybe play it without the audio so we can keep talking with Matt, because it basically, we're sort of discussing all the stuff that I've got in the footage, but one of them, which is great that you put this in and I did not know, but it also brings people that aren't necessarily White Sox fans into this, is I always love reminding people we had Harry Carey first.
Yes.
And that was when Harry Carey was at a 10. When you see Will Ferrell doing his impression, he was a little more sedate with the Cubs. But back in the day, and talk about your shirt off, Harry Carey would go to the bleachers, take his shirt off, oddly would always sit next to the hottest lady, and do the game drunk off his ass from the bleachers. It really was a Santa Claus is real moment with Harry and the White Sox. But anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying in the documentary, Harry Carey basically got her into prominence. She would start playing stuff that Harry would say and turning it and finding the appropriate songs. Thank you, boys. And again, it's a great reminder for other people out there that just associate him with the Cubs. But she essentially was like, hey, she's pretty smart with these little songs that are quips, and kind of brought her into more prominence with the Sox fans.
Yeah, he picked up on her wit because she was really witty in terms of like
right
away, like she'd see something and she has this catalog in her, and she's also like so gifted on the organ. What's interesting is like a lot of organ players you'll hear will have like a great right hand and maybe just play octaves with their left hand. But when I listen to Nancy, she's got like, she works both hands. Like it's pretty crazy how gifted she is to have that catalog in her mind.
Yeah.
Be able to play things with, she could just hear it and play it, and then add like the bass accompaniment and stuff is just so cool. But super witty. And Harry recognized that and it started pulling her into the broadcast, and then taking me out to the ball game, took it to a new level.
Oh God, it's so cool, and not to mention the fact that she's doing all. They always say with the Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers one, she did everything he did, but in heels and backwards.
Yeah.
Nancy's playing all these really witty teams, has to keep up with the competition, and then also come up with a song that's relevant if it's not something that she's just playing for the player himself. And meanwhile, you got doughy little Bill and his stupid brother going up there, hi, Miss Faust, can we have another signed card? And bothering the fuck out of her. And she was so nice to us. Always had enough time for the kids while she's doing all this, Yeah. She's absolute original.
And taking requests at the same time, like she's not like a huge baseball fan. So if a fan like knew a little something about a player, and, she would, think of a song to go with that right away. So she took a ton of input from the fans too, which is so cool.
Another thing I wanted to talk about, just because, we started the whole nah, hey, goodbye thing. We were the first to have an exploding scoreboard. This is now in every ballpark, you'll see an iteration of this. We were the first to do it, and we really did it. I noticed there was some footage of the original Turn Back the Clock game. But you didn't really touch on it. Was there not a lot was there not a lot there? Or was it just sort of, I guess it was inconsequential to the overall performance of the Sox that year. But it was this really cool thing. I was there at that game, still have the program, old 1917 program, and the T-shirt you got, there's a commemorative one of that. I almost feel like it's eBayable. But they had blowhorns instead of using audio. Like, they really did it, you know? They had, the scorecards were old-timey. It was something else.
Yeah, I mean, that was an awesome day, and we started that whole trend. That was the first team to do it. And so, yeah, like there's a ton of stuff I kind of wish we would have done something on that we just didn't, we could have done it. We had footage. Some of Nancy's footage was her playing the accordion.
Yes.
And I have that. And my brother and I did like a short little narrated video that we'll put back on YouTube about it. But yeah, it just didn't fit within the narrative. Like, we wanted to keep it rolling, and we just couldn't figure out how to work it in.
It's a fun little sub story, but it doesn't really sort of move it along. But it was really cool. And again, now all these guys are doing it, but like, you really felt like you were. And we had like at the time, which was kind of a modern video scoreboard, but we had the handheld one like that they have in Wrigley and everything for that game. And everyone's wearing straw hats and the big skirts and everything like that. It was really something else.
Yeah, it was cool. They really did it up, and they also like charged like 1919 prices for stuff. It was like a nickel for a popcorn. Like, it was hilarious.
Wow.
They didn't do the beer because that mistake had been made in Cleveland, I think, like 10 years.
Oh, I'll tell you what.
Beer night.
Speaking of beer, so many little things that I just had no idea about. And maybe you can speak to that and maybe some of the other idiosyncrasies of the final game. But they apparently, which blew my mind, particularly with Sox fans, they shut down beer vendors at the fifth inning.
Fifth?
For fear of souvenir hunters storming the field, overall violence. They figured, because, by the way, how counterintuitive that is. Yeah, the only thing worse than a drunk Sox fan is a Sox fan that cannot have beer. That's what you have to fear. And I don't know what they were thinking, but were there other things like that you discovered?
Yeah, like the shutting down beer sales in the last game in the fifth inning. That was really interesting. And like the whole vendor piece was interesting to me, that like they were a family too, in the fact that they would sell beer in the bathroom or like outside the bathroom and on the way to the parking lot. Like, those things aren't good, but that's what they used to do.
Unbelievable.
It's crazy. Yeah. And now you cut off sales. What is it, like the eighth now, I think? Top of the eighth with the play.
It's weird that when the Yankees have an added-on doubleheader that wasn't previously scheduled, it's odd how sometimes those beer sales just sort of mold into the second game and don't really end at the seventh. It's funny how that works. I feel like these rules are oftentimes not hard and fast. What about from your end, Joanne?
I was just thinking, if you go to Yankee Stadium, you go up to the steakhouse, they'll still serve you.
Yeah, she loves that.
I have my ways.
To go. Yeah, you got to know the tricks.
Just a little bit about you, real quick. You did this with your brother. Are you still talking to your brother? Because I feel like if I were to work on a project like this with my sister, it would be over.
Mike and I. That's a great. We loved The Last Dance, and that was kind of the inspiration. Like, we got to do something about one of the teams we love in baseball. In 1990, no one's ever going to do a documentary on a second place team. So we worked closely together on it. I definitely had more of a role, like, as we got in the early going. He did a lot of these narrated videos. He had a lot of ideas and kind of helped with the storyboarding, but I kind of took it over the finish line. So that probably was helpful that we weren't like in a room together, because then we definitely would not be talking anymore, because we get along great, but we also get on each other's nerves like any brothers do.
Now,
I have two of those myself.
This is technically not your career. You work in healthcare communications, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And you still are?
Still am. Yeah, so I did. I mean, I always say, like, this took 3 years because I had to do it like on nights and weekends. And, I had some great partners and things like that. But it's not my career. It's the first time I ever tried doing something like this. In my job, we do work with. So we're in the Chicago area, so I work with a few different producers from the Oprah show, and we do some video at work. So I picked up a lot from them in terms of just like how to interview a subject to get the best out of it, and like how to cut stuff together and keep it flowing. So I definitely am around it, but I've never done something like this before.
Right when I read healthcare communications for a biotechnology firm, I really actually did think, oh, actually, that will probably serve him very well in this project. And I definitely want to get to what I believe you've hinted at working on now, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah, what's
and
up
it may have
next?
something, maybe have a little something to do with your favorite Last Dance thing. But before I get to that, of the many weird things that happened that year, and guys, I do have a clip of the Andy Hawkins ticket. I indeed was at that game as well. Yankees throw a no-hitter in Chicago. Only time I've ever seen one. I think it's now been stricken from the record books. Yankees throw a no-hitter. Andy Hawkins, poor bastard. White Sox win 4-0. Even though he threw a no-hitter. I had forgot. I found my ticket, and I had thrown. I guess I tweeted out earlier. It's a tweet link, guys, of the actual ticket. It hasn't held the test of time, but I'm sure a lot more people say they were at that game these days. But what did you learn from that? I'd forgotten that it was at the final season. I remember going to it with my dad. My dad being like, "Save the ticket. Remember this game. You ain't never seen anything like this again." But it's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's funny because it was a day game, and so like you and I, we were like
There it
15
is.
at the time, right? I didn't go to the game, but day games at Old Comiskey on the weekend, like there was a lot of people that were pretty highly inebriated at those games. So I think and I've talked to people who went there, and they were like, we had no idea it was a no hitter.
Oh, yeah.
We just thought they won. So I think there were some people who didn't even know it was a no hitter, and Greg Hibbert had a no hitter going too for the White Sox through like the 5th inning.
Yeah.
It's a crazy game.
I mean, you and I were about 15, but
Yep.
I think the only reason I was cognizant of it is because my dad is a pretty responsible fellow. We were certainly surrounded by people that were not. And I think that most of the people there certainly didn't hold on to the ticket because they had, to your point,
Why
no
does
idea.
that ticket look like a third grader wrote it?
That's true.
How dare you make fun of our font
That's
style?
wild.
Well, that's what they used to look like. I mean,
I know, I'm saying
she's a dirty little millennial, so all she knows are tickets on her phone at this point. But that's a good example of the old style.
Yeah, I miss that. I miss my ticket stubs and my pocket
Me
schedule
too.
and my hard copy All-Star ballot, all that stuff.
Oh my God, yes, 1,000 times yes.
I'm sure Bill could go on for forever and
Yeah.
ever, but we do need to wrap this up. So tell us about what you're working on next.
So I haven't started working on it yet, but our concept is to do something on the Chicago Stadium, which closed 94, I think it was, and the Hawks played there and the Bulls played there. One of the guys who got me all the background footage, John, who's the security guy with Andy Frayne, he's got home video of the stadium and like the concourse and all that. So when I heard that, I was like, oh man, we gotta. Maybe we dig in on this. That'll be our next project. I haven't started yet, but it's percolating. It's
Yeah.
we're thinking through how that
You
could
know
go.
what? We talking about the upper deck of Comiskey and how unique it was, and you're almost falling onto the field. I'm wondering how in the hell you're going to try to convey the audio of Chicago Stadium back then. That is going to be another very difficult thing to do because it's you can't, and the sonics of the current stadium, United Center, it's not the same. But old Chicago Stadium, your ears would bleed, and that it really was like the fans were part of the team in the sense that it was very difficult to play there for that reason, particularly a Blackhawks game. Yeah, that's gonna be hard to duplicate.
Yeah, Larry Bird in his he wrote in one of his books, he talked about all the stadiums and the back end, and he said about Chicago Stadium, he was just loudest stadium by far.
Oh,
so as
God.
a player, that was crazy. You're trying to, and just to have that noise going, it was so loud.
I'm already getting chills. And again, she loved The Last Dance. I was so happy that she was in it to win it.
I just like watching old footage of stuff. I think that's
You do.
what I've discovered.
Well,
Yeah,
Matt, as you can see, again, I'm very much on the fence about this entire project. Don't really have any feelings one way or the other. I'm very impartial as per usual. I cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much for making this. I cannot wait for the sizzle, the behind the scenes stuff and the extra footage and all that. But the Chicago Stadium thing, oh good God, yes. We can't wait to have you back for that and
Thank you,
anything
Matt,
else
for
you
your
got.
time.
Please keep me abreast of anything you're working on. Any new ads, we'll love to have you on. But can't thank you enough.
Thank you. You guys look great. You dressed for this, which is awesome. Dressed better than me. And Bill, if I knew you while I was putting this together, you would have been in it. So maybe the next one.
Request permission to love you, Captain. I'm gonna send you some souvenirs from Turn Back the Clock game.
You're gonna regret saying that, Matt.
I can hear you deleting my email right now.
In the Nancy Faust story, we'll start working on the screenplay.
Oh
So.
God, I'm so in. Thanks again, buddy.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.